The following video contains content that some may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Have you ever felt like you did not belong in the moment? Not quite feeling out of place in a crowd, but instead feeling like the moment did not belong in the present. Only a handful of people have been documented experiencing such, and even fewer have actually witnessed these phenomena. In tonight's story, a young woman in the 1960s reports a ghostly incident when a moment in time seemingly moved backward. I'm Ted from Fate Rose Studios, and this is Into the Dark. The Haunting of Clara Mills. The 23rd of October 1963 began like any other morning in Lincoln, Nebraska. It was an overcast day over the campus of Nebraska Wesleyan University. The red brick buildings looked a ghostly purple, and leaf-strewn walkways almost appeared to be grey. Air smelled faintly of damp leaves and chalk dust, and the wind carried the distant hum of a marimba echoing from the old C.C. White building. Colleen Butabar was, at the time, the secretary to Dean Sam Dahl. Colleen walked briskly across campus, her heels tapping a steady rhythm against the flagstones. She was a young, educated lady in her 20s, a woman of habit, always dressed in pressed skirts, punctual arrivals, and a quiet fondness for the predictable. But nothing would have prepared her for what was to happen that day. Something felt off, not quite wrong exactly, just displaced, like a photo slightly out of focus. At 8:50 a.m., Colleen entered the C.C. White building, its corridors lined with faded portraits of long-retired faculty. The air smelled of a lingering scent of varnished wood. Students shuffled past Colleen, their whispers and yawns formed a sleepy chorus. Colleen nodded politely to a few familiar faces, then turned down the hallway toward room 204. The temporary office to a visiting lecturer from Scotland, Dr. Tom McCourt. She had typed his schedule the day before. He wouldn't be at the school until 9:30. The sounds of a distant marimba faded as she approached the door. Colleen reached for the brass knob, paused, and frowned. The air felt heavier here, still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Colleen opened the door. The suite was empty. 2 rooms, both quiet. The windows were open. Papers were stacked neatly on a desk, undisturbed. But that moment Colleen stepped inside the room, she somehow felt the temperature drop. A musty odor clung to the air. It smelled somewhat like old books and dusty attics. Colleen hesitated, her hand still on the doorknob. she dismissed the unusually eerie feeling that this morning brought. After all, she's been to this room hundreds of times. But nothing could have prepared Colleen for what she was to witness next. In the adjoining room, Colleen saw a woman standing, back turned, reaching into a tall cabinet. The woman was dressed in old 1920s fashion, a white shirtwaist tucked into a brown ankle-length skirt. Colleen thought to herself, how strange. In spite of this peculiar sight, Colleen tried to dismiss the eerie feeling that enveloped her. After all, the university has seen its share of unusual fashion choices from students and professors alike. Colleen stepped closer and blinked her eyes hard. She had just had an eye exam recently, and she was told by the ophthalmologist that she has 20/20 vision. But somehow she felt like the scene was a tad out of focus. The woman moved with quiet purpose, filing cards with slender fingers. Her clothing was indeed an unmistakably old-fashioned, from perhaps 50 years prior. But somehow, they looked surprisingly new. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, and she radiated calm and focus. Colleen held her breath as she realized she hadn't heard anyone enter. She hadn't seen anyone pass her in the hall, and yet here this woman stood, as real as the desk beside her. The eerie feeling washing over her, clinging to her like a thick fog, while at the same time she noticed that all the sounds from the hallway suddenly stopped. She could no longer hear any students, even the reverberating marimba. Now there is just deafening silence. Colleen forced herself to step forward. Heart pounding, her legs felt like wrought iron posts. She opened her mouth to try to utter a word, but something stopped her. The feeling of someone staring. Definitely a presence. To her left, near the desk, just in a peripheral, she thought she saw the outline of a person. A man. She turned her head quickly. No one. But Colleen was so sure she felt the stare of someone. Just watching. Sitting. Waiting. Colleen tried to shake off the feeling. She was a woman of reason, she thought to herself. She looked out the window behind the desk, and whatever escape she thought she would achieve by diverting her attention to the outside has now just dissipated. The view outside was all wrong. Definitely wrong. There were no paved streets, no Willard sorority house, just an open lawn, green and freshly mown. And to her astonishment, an antiquated Ford was driving by in the distance. Was there a historical reenactment going on outside? She thought. But that couldn't possibly explain why everything outside was different. Colleen could not bring herself to determine what in the world is happening. This scene belonged to an entirely different time. A different time. About half a century ago. Colleen mustered all her will and attempted to put one foot forward, yet her knees merely trembled. As a woman of logic, she thought to herself, she must investigate and find out who the woman is and the purpose of her visit in this office. However, the presence to her left, which she thought she had shaken off, has all but returned with a more malicious stare. And then, before Colleen's very eyes, the woman faded into thin air. Not an abrupt flicker, but gradually like dissipating mist. Colleen could take not one more second of this. She turned and ran with all her strength. Every step felt like her foot was stuck in thick mud, and yet somehow the hallway sounds that vanished from just moments ago has suddenly all come back. It was as if a record was put back on and blasted at full volume. Never have these sounds felt so deafening, but simultaneously comforting. Now, in Dean Dahl's office, Colleen struggled to compose herself. Her fingers hovered over the typewriter keys, but they refused to move. It has now been 5 minutes, and she has yet to type a single letter. She chose not to tell anyone. Yet. Never mind the surprised looks she got from the students she passed by the corridors. Never mind the organizer she dropped mid-sprint. She feared that she would be taken as a woman slipping from her grip on reality. After all, another staff has just recently been admitted and rumoured to have gone completely disturbed. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She felt as though she'd ripped through a veil and now couldn't quite return. Dean Dahl noticed immediately. He rose, helped Colleen to another chair, and listened as she recounted the encounter. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss her story. Instead, he nodded slowly and suggested they speak with Dr. Glenn Callan, the oldest faculty member on campus. Dr. Callan's office smelled of pipe smoke and dusty books. He listened intently, his eyes narrowing with each detail. When Colleen described the woman's clothing, the cabinet, the view from the window, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "That sounds like Miss Urania Clara Mills," he said quietly. "She taught music theory here in the 1920s. And that room you were in, that used to be her office." Colleen's mouth went dry. She just knew that it wasn't just her imagination. The vision of the lady, the sharp stare she felt, the silhouette of a man felt more real. And then nothing could have prepared Colleen for what Dr. Callan told her next. "She died in that very room," Callan added. "Found early one morning, after a heavy blizzard. Died of heart failure, they say. But she'd been working late, preparing for a recital." Callan produced a dusty yearbook from one of the towering shelves in his office. He turned the browned pages of the book painfully slow, not from old age, but because the pages of the book have become delicately brittle. It took 20 or maybe 30 minutes for him to find what he was looking for. He turned to a page and positioned the book to face Colleen and Dean Dahl. It was the woman. Definitely the woman Colleen saw. The dress, the hair, and even the calm repose on her face. Colleen shivered. Over the next few days, Colleen couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her. Not a ghost exactly, more like a memory that had been permanently burned into her mind. Colleen gave not many interviews about this strange encounter. She was not one who acted for attention. In fact, Mrs. Colleen Butterball left her job shortly after and moved to Colorado. Nothing else has been documented or heard of Colleen after the strange apparition of 1963. Colleen herself had somewhat turned into a ghost of university. And yet somehow, this incident became the catalyst for many other sightings of the ghostly Miss Urania Clara Mills. Even decades later, there were reports by students and faculty of hearing piano music playing in empty rooms, especially near Clara Mills' former office. However, Colleen Butabar's account remains to this day the only one that involved traveling to the past and seeing the place as it were in the 1920s. And strangely enough, there were no other known reports of such apparition before Colleen Butabar's account. Was it just a ghostly apparition? Was it a slip of the mind? But what could explain Colleen being thrown back in time, the view outside the office window? Did Colleen experience a temporary lapse in consciousness, or was she plunged into the dark?